When you are a brand new minister, there are certain tricks of the trade that you swear you will never do, such as starting your sermon with a definition. But then 2 years of a pandemic later, refuge, a condition of being safe or sheltered from pursuit, danger, or trouble. As we watch the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and mourn the loss of life, I can't help but think of all those civilians endangered by Russia's invasion. I cannot help but wonder about the families who have been separated, children sent away across borders, lives endangered. Refuge. In the face of an onslaught of anti-trans legislation and our own very special Texas brand of doing an end run around said legislation, I do not fault my queer siblings and their families who are earnestly reevaluating the safety of remaining in the places they call home. Refuge. As the assault on women's control of their own bodies continues, we plan for the next legislative session and wonder if it will ever be enough. We raise funds for organizations that help women cross state borders to receive necessary health care, which you can do at the Arts in Action event next month. That table can tell you how. We raise funds, we prepare, and we wonder if it will ever be enough. Refuge, a condition of being safe or sheltered from pursuit, danger, or trouble. In the face of all of this, as a cisgender American with financial means who is unlikely to need an abortion personally, my own need for refuge can feel fairly inconsequential. And depending on your own identities and social location and context, I suspect that some of you can relate to that. But in the face of all this, my own need for refuge also feels pretty crucial. Last week, I found some refuge in a place I was not looking for it. In a webinar of all ridiculous things, from the UUA's Side with Love campaign and the Trevor Project, speaking directly to the anti-trans campaigns we are resisting around the country. It was a good webinar. And one of the things that each of the beautiful, fabulous, passionate, talented queer faith activists that led that webinar, each one of them named the need to take shifts in the revolution, to take time to ground ourselves in our own lives and our own spirits, and to surround ourselves with the people and activities we love, to celebrate small victories, to find our own places of refuge. Because when we give it away all the time, when we give it all away, there's nothing left but to dry up and blow away. That's not what I want. Because all of us need all of us to make it. If you, like me, lean toward minimizing your own fear and rage and sorrow, if you, like me, lean toward putting off caring for yourself to care for others, this one is for you. If you, like me, sometimes need permission to fall into your own places of refuge, to heal from your own traumas, large and small, to be held and cared for by others, and the great love that binds us all together, consider that permission given. How and where do you go for refuge? I intended to name some concrete ways of finding rest and refuge, But I had trouble knowing where to start. I knew I wanted to share the reading from Clarissa Pinkola Estes with you, because that's the first thing that pops into my head anytime anyone says, I need some comfort in this messed up world. I actually had to go back and check and make sure that I had not shared it with you in the last few months. I try to space it out. Apparently I've done it a couple times now, but some things bear repeating. As I said earlier in the Time for All Ages, we're a people that prefer good questions to simple answers. And I like that about us. So this week, I want to invite us into a method of self-examination around this question of where do we find the things we need for ourselves, to pinpoint what refuge looks like for each of us. And next week, we'll have the chance to share our own visions. Each of you will be invited to share a vision of refuge, to share them with each other. Sometimes in our services, our Time for All Ages is a story that touches on the same themes and the same message as the rest of the service. And sometimes it takes the form of the same message in different words. And sometimes it takes the form of the first part of the sermon. We talked about, in our Time for All Ages, the interior life and the ultimate universal life and our relational life. This is a way of looking at spirituality, looking at self or identity in 3 dimensions. It's 3 different lenses that we can use. And each of these offers a place of refuge, of solace, of comfort. When we think of our interior life, we think of the things that connect us to who we are and to the people and ideas that we are connected to. We can find refuge in the interior life. We can find solace and comfort in our connection to the ultimate. I think of this as sort of a graph, like in math classes, the graph chart has a vertical axis and an x-axis and a y-axis. The self is in the center. And the ultimate is that vertical dimension that connects us up into that which is transcendent and down into what grounds us. Funny enough, those are always the same thing for me. I don't know what that is. We can take solace and comfort by reflecting and reminding ourselves and surrounding us with words that connect us to those values that most orient us. What are we oriented toward? That's a question I don't always ask myself. I could think a lot about what values orient me, what poems describe how I want to be in the world, that kind of thing. But what is it that I'm pointing to with all of those? What are the things that I will give myself to? How do I describe the larger world that I'm a part of? The transcendent and the grounding outside of us. And that horizontal axis in that grid that I described is our relational life. Both the people and groups of people that are directly in our orbit, and also our connection to ultimately all of humanity. To whom do you belong? Who has loved you into being here? Who has your back? Who are your people? How does that play out in your life? Now, every one of us is better at one of these things than the others. And every one of us, in general, I'm not going to say everyone is a dangerous thing to say here. Most of us find ourselves better at one of these things than the other. And most of us will look at one of these things and feel kind of sad. Like, I don't have enough of that. I need more of that in my life. So if you're thinking about this grid, it also moves from, you can also think of it as arrows that go out into infinity in all 4 directions. Starting with the circles that are closest to us, the individuals that we greet on a daily basis, our family, our friends, our church community, the other groups that we're part of, our Girl Scout troop, our parents' circle and moves out and out into larger and larger communities. And that was the refuge that I was describing earlier that I found on that webinar. I thought, oh my gosh, I missed my people. You are also my people. But I am your minister, so it's a little bit different. I have to find those things elsewhere also for connection. So this moves out from the concrete to the abstract, right? But if we pay attention to what is ours to do in each of these areas, in your own little circles, your way of being will ripple out far beyond you. Trickle-down economics, not so much, but ripples out into the larger world, absolutely. One of the things that makes the religious experience unique is that it's one of the few places that we are directly challenged to think about ourselves in all three dimensions. Northwoods is certainly a place of refuge for many of us, often. It's also a place to grow, to find inspiration. And we touch on all of these parts of our lives here. When we talk about interior life, we talk about spirited searching. We explore our biggest wonderings together, our wonderings about ourselves, these tiny, incredible lives that we've received, and also seek to transcend them into that larger love life of the universe. We think about our relational life as part of a compassionate community, not just about how we are together and how we want to be in the world, but the world we want to be in, right? We talk about starting with the micro level, our own lives, and extending that out into the larger world. Compassionate community is not just for us, but it's for what we want to build in the world, for everyone. That's why it matters. And we connect to the ultimate life through our courageous actions. And a lot of times we think about our courageous actions as the actions that we do outside of this community, that we do in service to the world, that we do as part of our commitment to social justice. But courageous action is not just about that justice work, right? It's both in the internal level and moving outward into that work that we do in the world. Courageous action is also about how we live our lives, how we set our boundaries, what activities and relationships we make a priority. And if you think those things don't require courageous action, perhaps you have not been paying attention. Those things all require courage from me. This is a time for solace and comfort, but it is not a time for withdrawal. Sometimes refuge can look like a stepping back, a folding in. Sometimes that is what we need to feel safe. But sometimes refuge can look like engagement and stepping into the things that ground and nurture us. I encourage you to consider these questions for yourself this week, looking at all three dimensions of your spiritual life and finding the places and practices that nourish you, looking for the places where there's room to grow. Here are some questions to guide that reflection. What is sacred to you? Do you have a refuge in your life, both either physical or psychological? What does it offer you? If you do not have a refuge in your life, can you imagine what it would be like if you did? How does your own sense of peace and equanimity, it's a great word, equanimity, how do those serve the greater good? And how do you offer peace to others? And I also have a spiritual exercise that I would like to invite everyone to be a part of this week. This week, gather things that bring peace and meaning to your life. Readings, items from nature, visual art, symbolic, personal items. Maybe you have an altar in your home or a mantle where you put your most precious belongings that remind you of the things you care about most. Think of the places that are sacred to you, whether places in your home or backyard or places halfway around the world. Spend time thinking about these places and these things that ground you and how they touch your heart. And then, this is the action part, email me a picture, a few words, a short video for inclusion in next week's service in a visual litany of sacred spaces and places. In the reading I did earlier, we are reminded that a harbor is not what great ships are built for, but sometimes we need to put in at port. May you remember your own resilience. May you find what you seek. May you find what you need here together so that we may emerge with the strength and dedication we need to build that better tomorrow for us all.